it's a real pleasure to introduce the first keynote speaker. Now, he's Dutch. I have lots of Dutch friends, and I always manage to mangle their names. So I did ask him how his name would be pronounced. I'll give it a go. Jeroen van der Veer. Oh, a thumbs up. Anyway, you can find all the details in your brochure, the timings, the biodata of the people. But Jeroen is a former boss of Royal Dutch Shell, and now on the chairman of the supervisory board of Philips and ING. So, Jeroen, please.
Good morning to all of you. The Swiss may be very good in insurance, but if you have such a dangerous small podium like this, the Dutch will say probably this is probably sponsored by my pension fund. Okay, how I'm going to do it? I got only 15 minutes and 5 minutes for questions, but I'm the whole day here. So I like to go a bit of staccato, the main thoughts, but if you would like deeper going into it, for instance, how to make payments from or to Iran, or certain things about sanctions. So I know a lot more than I just say here, but I'm approachable for the whole day for you. But I will tell you some strengths I see from Iran, then the whole business development. So, and I think for most here in the audience, it is about re-entry. You are either like to receive re-entries or to promote or to do it yourself. Then how to do it, what did I learn in my life, some pitfalls and good to knows, and how you can learn from each other. And that all in 15 minutes. Having said that, I've quite some footsteps in Tehran. That was pre the sanction days. I've been involved in buyback projects. That is how we renovated in the what we call in Dutch the Persian Gulf, but sometimes it is the Arabian Gulf, where we renovated old producing installations offshore, and later we tried to develop an LNG project. We were in fact quite far with the Iranians, but then we were called by the sanctions. And I have quite some experience with the very large, in those days, state-owned chemical company, which is, in my view, an excellent chemical company. Now, the basis of my re-entry experience is, I'm not going to dwell that, but it is basically Russia, China, Vietnam, India, and Pakistan. So, and you see all the time patterns how to do it and what not to do it. Now, my first remark, and I will be short because probably all of you know why you would like to do a re-entry, but let me say certain things that come to my mind. I'm a strong believer in my industrial background. You don't go for a quick dollar or a quick buck. You go to Iran, or you have something in Iran, or you export to Iran, or you are interested in exports from Iran, because it is a long-term win-win for your company or whatever you do. So you go with a long-term vision. So you have to know, why is Iran attractive? I think that is, for most companies, quite easy. It is a very large market. There is a middle class, which is not, the middle class is in fact in percentage larger than some other Middle Eastern countries. One can expect high growth. I expect in the coming 10 years a lot of economic growth, and that is for entrepreneurs, of course, ideal. Then what's not as always highlighted, technical skills of the people are very good, not only on university level, but on vocational level as well. This is an exception in the Middle East as well. So their whole schooling system, so people know to build factories, etc., and to run it. They have standards and they have a feeling for excellence. I like that. And there is some basic infrastructure. It needs a lot of investment still, but it is there. Labor costs are lower than most Middle Eastern countries, albeit one has to expect higher than Pakistan, but then it's probably more difficult to start your enterprise in Pakistan. One can expect to see Iran as an exporter as well, certainly of manufacturing goods. In a strange way, you can say the stability is maybe not always the stability that Western countries liked. But if you look at the country, it has basically quite stable over the years. So here you see some factors of the why. But now the house. you may be surprised, there are 7 hows to re-enter a country. And this is the most important decision. In Shell, we would debate that quite long and quite deep. And we will debate it with our board, because if you have to make your choice between those 7, and it is not that easy to switch from one to another. It's not impossible, but that is probably your most important choice you make. I give you the 7 possibilities how to go into a country. The first one is you employ an agent. So that is, I call it a 100% agent. He or she represents your company. But that is very difficult to choose the agent. All the agents will claim that they know the key decision makers. But who are the key decision makers? Why do you need the key decision makers? Is that so important? Secondly is, what are the practices of the agent? And you have to realize that practices in Iran may be different from elsewhere in the world. Whereas your company has to do with the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and then you should make sure that your agent is not doing things which he should not do, but do you get transparency on that? You have the Anti-Bribery Act, so it is basically the USA and the UK, but other countries are on that path as well. And what maybe is seen in the US as corruption is in Iran seen as cost of doing business. So there are different attitudes to it. And then last but not least, when I was a young engineer going over the world for Shell, then if you had an agent in a country, then 20% commission was quite normal. But nowadays 20% is not normal. And certainly without transparency what happened with those 20%. So we have to realize that the bar, what agents can do or cannot do, has gone up. But the first approach is the agent, but your problem is the choice, and even if they have access to decision makers now, will they be the decision makers of tomorrow? The second one is what I call you make a joint venture, but you accept a minority share. We usually call that 40-60. And then there's the problem, that is of course quite interesting. So the majority is owned by Iranians. They know how to work in their country. But you have to wonder, is that then just a financial participation? So what is your influence by having 40%? And then you have to realize that the experience of Western companies regarding governance and external auditors or internal auditors or all kind of things you like to do is not necessarily in line with the expectations of the Iranian side. The third way to re-enter the country, you see it very often, is a 50-50, so half-half of the new joint venture. This is probably the most difficult one. That is my experience. Yeah? Basically, I don't like 50-50s, but it is sometimes you end up with it. If you are interested, I can explain you later. Then you have the fourth one. You take a majority share, so a 60-40 as foreigner, and then it's 40% as Iranian. This is quite interesting, but you have to realize if you have the 60%, you think you can act according to your own standards, your own norms, your own governance, but it is not necessarily appreciated by your Iranian partners. Usually you start well, but after a year, the local people think that you work much too expensive, all kind of gold-plated standards, so that may create friction. The only way to do it is to make a kind of operator agreement that you have really very clearly according which standards you operate and what you expect from the Iranians, and will they have key positions in the management, etc. So it needs a lot of additional thinking in itself. It is quite good possible. Then the fifth way is, and that is basically if you have a free choice in Shell, is the preferred way. You try to set up an own company with 100% local people, so local own management. So an Iranian company with Iranians. So it should feel Shell and Iranian, I would have said 10 years ago. I'm now retired for the good order, but that was the way we approached it. But then is the problem how to start. I think the best example is, by the way, we did that a bit in Pakistan, but especially in China, where we started with a kind of $4 billion investment. We basically recruited people of Chinese descent from all over the world who had worked either already for Shell or for other oil companies or other chemical companies, and we brought them to China as a kind of expat initially, but then you had all the languages advantages, and still people were in fact quite proud to do that. So that was a very good start. And later, of course, when the plant was built and was running well, those people either became real locals, so to say, or they went back to the US, wherever they came from. The sixth possibility is you start with a small nucleus of expats. Then again, where I try to recruit Iranians. There are many in the US, there are people in the UK. Quite some people I have spoken are quite motivated to do something for their former country. But in the end, you have to realize that even expat Iranians are not seen as local Iranians, so you have to think that through how to go from there. And the last way, of course, the seventh way is, if that's possible, that you try to buy part or you buy an Iranian company. That depends fully on the type of business you are and what's possible. Now, that are the 7 ways. My message is, think very carefully about that. Now then, for people, of course, who are only exporters from, say, the West or the East to Iran, think about insurance, export insurance. We have just, in the Netherlands, we have been very busy with Atradius, insurance company, Spanish insurance company, John. But they are quite involved in the Netherlands. And Atradius is now open for business. So you can have your export insurance. The ambassador, the Dutch ambassador, is nodding her head. We had to really, there were quite some problems because there was an ex-payment from a long time ago. I don't bore you with that. It is all solved. But keep it in mind, it is open for business. Then the sanctions. The sanctions is still quite complicated. The themes are still changing. And payments from and to Iran. Let me be short here. There is an extremely interesting speech from about 2 weeks ago from John Kerry in Palace Hotel, New York. You can find it on the internet. And what he says in that speech is, there are all kinds of stories about sanctions. There are all kinds of stories that you can't pay or you can pay. And he said, if in doubt, ask. Ask is basically, ask the Americans what you can do. And he says that 6 times. It's a short speech. Those people who have problems there, please read it because it is really clarifying where we are. And by the way, I expect the situation is not static at all. It may be quite different in 2 or 3 months from now. So everybody involved in banking or in payments or still doubts on those sanctions, keep following it. But it is quite clear that state, as they call it in the US, they are active and they try to provide information. Okay, now I had 7 ways of re-entry. I have 7 pitfalls or good to knows. And they basically go that the basic point is we are on a mutual learning curve. And then let me tell what I've experienced. In Iran, is the clarity of contracts is extremely important. What I learned the hard way is that definitions which you take for granted or logical are not necessarily in the Iranian eyes. When you have your partners or the government there, they are following that logic. I give you an example. For the buyback projects, we had a cost-reimbursed project with a certain profit incentive. So we had to renovate those old producing oil installations. And then they were cost-reimbursed. Now, then you expect when you make cost, you get it back. Now, that is not how it worked, because the Iranians said, no, you get only the cost according to the budgets you had submitted. And our actual costs, largely caused by them, by all kinds of additional requirements, were higher. And then you get a huge discussion whether you get your costs back according to the budget, which is of course lower, or the actual cost made. Now, And then I have to tell you that one of the strengths I didn't mention in the beginning, but the Iranians are very good negotiators. Now you can feel 10,000 years of experience. Huh? Yeah. And I'm a simple engineer, so yeah. And but the way to prevent that is simply making good contracts with clear definitions and thinking it through along the example I gave. The second point is, we don't know very well the judicial system in Iran. So if you start to have a disagreement, make sure that you have a quick mediation way that is better for yourself, is better for your partners, and for everybody. There are certain countries, Chamber of Commerce rules, I can explain all of it, which work reasonably quickly. And that is much better than waiting judicial systems and going into appeals, what have you, in a country that you don't know. Third one is watch out with language. This is not only Iran, but to be very short in it, if your partners say we make a win-win situation, some partners mean I win, you lose. So keep that in mind as well. So think through the language, what they really mean. And sometimes you have to deal with nonsense. I have a very good example, is that if you are a very small company and you set something up in Iran, then that company, they have listened to one American lawyer and they say, we like to have a parent company guarantee. Now that's fine. If your small company is 10 million or something like that, then the value of that is a guarantee of 10 million. But if you set up a relative, say, small lubricants operation in Iran, and you ask the parent company from Shell, that is basically a parent at the present market cap about $140 billion. Yeah? So that's not a fair question to do that. But you have to explain that to the people. So think about the conditions. Sometimes if you explain it to them, they will be reasonable. Study taxation. Taxation is probably still quite complex, not only federal, but you can local taxations. If you get duty-free zones, but if you leave the duty-free zone, have you then to make up the taxes for the past years? All those kind of things. My sixth advice is, glad that here are some ambassadors, use embassies. Nearly all the countries that I know, not only the Netherlands, but all the countries in Europe, they are strengthening their embassies just to advise you, to help you, and they can be very helpful. If you consider to have an agent or a partner, go to your own embassy, ask the question, ask what they know about it. Those people are there to help, and that of course makes sense. And you can even ask all this story that all these agents, who are the key decision makers? Are they real key decision makers? Embassies know a lot about it. And of course, probably you will do that. You see many trade missions. Now you see many specialized trade missions. And I like that. That is a very effective way. You get political help. You can figure that out yourself. I come now to the end of my speech, John, but there is one thing which is a free gift for me, which we just formed in the Netherlands. We formed an advisory board, that is always more safe than a real board, for trade and cultural relations between Iran and the Netherlands. And why did we add cultural to that? That makes it possible for non-business people, for instance, for ex-ambassadors to Iran or people from the art side to join that kind of institute as well. But what do we aim with that advisory board, this cultural trade and cultural advisory board? That we have basically every 2 months, we have a get-together so we can learn from each other, learn from maybe how about the sanctions, how about new taxation rules, how about whatever, so that people who are busy in Iran, at least in our country, know each other. It is a mutual learning path that goes better, and I fully agree. I have seen in my life, business is a real force for good, is much more effective, and that is the real win-win situation. Thank you very much.
Jeroen, thank you very much indeed. Would you like to take a seat? And You did actually go over, but if you see, it was actually 3 minutes 24 seconds over.
Oh, sorry.
But it was so practical
Yeah.
that I felt that I could indulge you.
Yeah.
But let us now indulge the audience. Just for, we have a couple of minutes for questions. Any questions, please put your hand up. Gentleman there. And if you could identify yourself, that would also be very kind.
Thank you very much. My name is Giulio Terzi.
From the UANI, yeah.
Yes, I have been asked by my colleague in the advisor board of UANI to come here to attend this discussion and to cooperate to raising awareness on the situation, the business situation
Okay.
in Iran and the implication of doing business in Iran. I'm grateful for the opportunity of giving some added facts to what was said at the beginning by
With respect, I mean, you were very welcome here, and it's very nice to have you. But could you ask a question rather than giving a statement, which would be much more useful and more polite to Jeroen?
Absolutely. The question is that since we are seeing this forum construed around a narrative which gives to the European business the idea that it is true to have a sort of a gold rush to Iran because JCPOA implementation is opening up all doors and removes all existing sanctions to, in fact, posed by the international community. The question is the business community aware enough on the fact that still exists a very serious sanctions in the area of human rights, where the
Okay, I'm not
Council has deliberated,
sure.
Clearly
Excellent.
a couple of weeks ago, and also in the financial sector, all the area controlled by
Ambassador Terzi, sure.
and the recycling.
Ambassador Terzi, with respect, I mean, I do appreciate your views. However, the question is supposed to be addressed to Jeroen, and I don't think it's really within, well, do answer if you can.
The question is the European sanctions on human rights and the financial monitoring by the FATF, and how safe is the credit and financial situation in Iran in terms of making sure that there are no connections between the business coming to Iran and the RGC controlled company.
Now, let's be very short about the sanctions. Not all sanctions today have been lifted. And especially you can say you have European sanctions, you have sometimes strong, even you have country sanctions which are more stringent than European sanctions. And if you are a European company but you have involvement in the US, then you have to follow US sanctions as well. So this is a very complicated story. That's one. Human rights, the criterion for business, my advice to all of you is you have to stick to sanctions. Sorry, that was the previous point. As far as human rights, the only thing is a company who invests in Iran or has an operations in Iran is not responsible for the total human rights situation in Iran. This is incorrect. You are responsible for your own operations, that human rights are applied in your own operations that you apply. That is for a business. And stay for the rest, you have to stay out of politics. But you have to say, in our operations, we follow human rights, we follow business principles, we are not corrupt, etc. And this is how we do it. And then you make that transparent. So don't expect, like the NGOs, they expect that businesses should speak up about general human rights situations. I put a question mark behind that.
Thank you very much. And in fact, the next session is going to be on sanctions.
Yeah.
Another question, please. Have you all been cowed into silence?
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Barbara Steven, yes. There should be, is there a microphone here?
Barbara Slavin from the Atlantic Council.
The microphone is coming because Your dulcet tones will be broadcast to the world.
Barbara Slavin from the Atlantic Council. We are all waiting with bated breath for the new Iranian oil contract. What is your understanding about when it's actually finally going to be presented, and is it going to be attractive? Thanks.
I hesitate to say that now, but I'm not any longer in Shell, so yeah, I follow it basically on information I get from the press. Of course, the whole problem is that the initial thoughts and advisors to Iran regarding, let's say, lifting of oil, etc., was still done when the price was a lot higher. So they started off with a kind of too optimistic mindset, and then you don't attract investors. The advantage of being very good negotiators, that at a certain moment they realize reality. And I think, and the Iranians have the aspiration to export a lot more oil, which is a very logical thought, and that is of course the battle within the OPEC as well. But it takes a bit of time, but that will happen. And the oil companies are quite flexible in their contracts as long as they feel that their investments are safe and they can make some money on it. Yeah?
Thank you. I'm conscious that we are already over time, so please nobble Jeroen, as we would say in English, afterwards. There is a question there. Okay, very quickly. Yeah.
Peter Friedley from Glencore.
Yeah.
We are active in the commodities trading space, as you might be aware. So we are actively looking for banks willing to settle Iran-linked commodity deals. And with this background, just wondering what is ING's current policy or view on facilitating such settlements? Thank you.
I feel to speak here and very much in ING, even what I say today may not be valid tomorrow, but it is in line with my first answer is that I can take it offline, by the way, but what the present situation is. The banks follow all the sanctions, and including the US sanctions. You don't have a choice. Having said that, the US sanctions, especially regarding payments, has probably a bit more flexibility than at least part of the audience knows or expects. That's why I refer to this John Kerry speech. And that's the best you can do.
Okay. Jeroen, thank you very, very much indeed. I think you deserve a huge round of applause.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Be careful how you step down.